Hello, hi friends. Welcome to Literary Criticism class. I'm Dr. Chandeshwar Yadav, welcoming you from my core of heart. Today, in this video, I'm going to talk about what literary criticism is. As you will clearly understand about literary criticism. So, whenever talking about literary criticism, you can see literary criticism as a phrase is made out of two words. One is literary, another is criticism. Literary denotes any piece of writing, basically, that is imaginative. For example, either it is a story, essay, poetry, or drama. In the same way, criticism, that is one of the English word, is derived from ancient Greek term called kritos, krites, kritos, which means judge or judgment. So, literary criticism, by literally, you can say judgment of literary text. So, judgment of literary text is called literary criticism. So, here, what is literary criticism? That I like to make you clear through an example. So, suppose that you have visited in one uh, marriage party. At one marriage party, suppose that you have visited. In the party, you might have seen varieties of things, or variety of things you might have observed. For example, you might have observed the lighting system of that party. You might have observed sound system of that party. You might have observed reception of the party. You might have observed any other thing, or you have observed, you have seen the food pattern. So varieties of things you have observed at that marriage party. But on the next day, whenever you are at your home, whenever you are at your home with your friends or with your relatives, you start talking about that party. At that time, you talked the sound system of the party was not so nice. In the same way, you can see, you can analyze, you can judge that the lightning system was the perfect one. In the same way, you can see a reception was very nice. Even you can say that food pattern or food was tasty. In this way, whatever you are doing here is that you are analyzing the party, you are judging the party, you are examining the party. So whenever, if you are examining something, whenever you are judging something, whenever you are judging something, at that time you talk about some positive aspect of that thing, you talk about negative aspect of that thing. So talking positive and negative aspect of something, either it is a literary text, or it is the society, or it is a social problem. So talking about positive aspect, talking about negative aspect, being neutral is literary criticism, my dear friends. And so here you can say literary criticism is the comparison, literary criticism is the analysis, literary criticism is the interpretation or evaluation of works of literature, or whenever any works of literature is compared with other piece of writing, whenever a works of literature is analyzed, whenever a works of literature is interpreted or evaluated, then that is called literary criticism, dear friends. In the same way, literary criticism is essentially supported by evidence, supported by style, supported by setting, supported by historical event or political context. So, whenever you are presenting something, you are analyzing something with evidence, with style, with setting, with historical incident, event, or political context, then it is called literary criticism. So, I hope you know what literary criticism is, dear friends. And talking about again literary criticism, then literary criticism basically originated at the time of Aristotle. So, here, origin of literary criticism. So Aristotle believes that author's intent can be understood by examining 7 different clues, or out of 7 different clues, you can understand the intention of the author said by Aristotle. I hope you know about Aristotle, a great classical philosopher. So, according to this classical philosopher, a author intention or a text can be understood using using these 7 clues, and these are chance, nature, compulsion, habit, reason, passion, and desire. So, out of these 7 clues, you can understand the intention of the author, dear friends. In the same way, so basically, whenever criticism as a word we listen, whenever criticism as a term we hear, what we think, when we hear criticism, we might automatically think about pointing out weaknesses or failures. But here, criticism is not only pointing out weaknesses, not only talking about demerits, not only talking about disadvantage, but or however, criticism can be favorable as well as unfavorable, as I've said you earlier that in criticism both are talked, positive aspects are analyzed, at the same time negative aspects are analyzed. It means that's why here says criticism can be favorable as well as unfavorable. And so literary criticism helps interpret the meaning of a short story, helps interpret the meaning of the poem, helps meaning of the poem or drama. That's why literary criticism is an essential aspect to understand the society, understand the piece of writing. So, literary criticism is an attempt. Literary criticism is an attempt to understand, ultimately evaluate what an author has created, or what an author has said in a literary text, that should be understood only by using literary criticism. That's why literary criticism is one of the tool of understanding the literary text or literary item. As in the picture, you can see Albert Einstein is explaining something. In the same way, literary criticism of a works usually refers, let's see what literary criticism of a works usually offers. So it offers interpretation of its meaning or interpretation of the literary writing. So it helps us to find out the meaning of the text. In the same way, it also offers analysis of its structure and style. So, whenever giving criticism of any literary text, it helps us, or we should analyze the structure of the literary text, we should analyze the style of the literary text. That is also the part of literary criticism. In the same way, it also offers judgment of its worth by comparison with other works. So, as we talked earlier, in literary criticism, two texts are compared, or if one text is compared with another text, one thing is compared with another thing, that is also the part of literary criticism. In the same way, literary criticism offers estimation of its likely effect on a reader or whatever type of effects are created by the text on the author, that is also the part of literary criticism. So literary criticism can be applied to a genre. Literary criticism can be applied to genre. Here I hope you know genre of forms of literature is called genre. So in each and every form of literature, literary criticism can be applied. In the same way, it can also be applied to an author's writing as a whole. So on a whole, one writer has written how many books, how many novels, how many dramas and poems are written to analyze all the writing of one particular writers. Even you can use literary criticism. In the same way, literary criticism can be applied a specific literary work. So one writer can write many more books, but here you can use literary criticism to analyze all the books of that author, and at the same time you can use literary criticism to analyze one particular literary work or literary piece of writing. So here critical process basic steps. So whatever or whenever you are analyzing the text or whenever you are doing literary criticism, then what are the steps that you can see here? So the first step of doing literary criticism is understanding what the text says or what the text or literary text try to say. That thing first of all you should understand. Without understanding the text or without understanding what the text is saying, it is tough to understand or it is tough to do critical criticism or literary criticism. So understanding what the text says is the first basic steps of literary criticism. In the same way, second basic steps of what literary criticism is analyzing literary element. So in one literary element, varieties of elements are there, and that you should analyze those literary element. For example, even in the story, plot is there, character is there, point of view is there, symbolism is there, irony is there, or many more other elements are there. So whatever elements are there in a literary text, that you should analyze if you are doing literary criticism. So analyzing literary element is another steps of literary criticism. In the same way, the third steps of literary criticism is interpreting the literature by making broad observation or generalization of the theme. So here you should do broad observation of the literary text, and by doing broad observation or generalization of the theme, you can interpret the literature. So interpreting the literature is another steps of literary criticism. In the same way, dear friends, the fourth steps of literary criticism is evaluating the literature by applying a specific criteria or through a specific point of view, through a specific lens. You should interpret the literary text. Or if you are using, or if you are interpreting the text, if you are doing criticism of any text, then using any particular lens, using any particular item or perspective, you should use or you should do literary criticism. So these are the steps of doing literary criticism, dear friends. So here, literary criticism, what is the purpose? Then now we are talking about what is the purpose of doing literary criticism, or why we do literary criticism. That thing now we are talking. So let's see what purpose does a literary criticism serve. So here, literary criticism helps to explain a work and its underlying principle to reader who may not fully understand the text. So what the first purpose of analyzing or doing literary criticism is that it helps us to explain a work, or to explain a work to understand its underlying principle. It is it is the need of doing literary criticism. As suppose, or even you can see on the screen, on the slide, one person is reading the text, and whenever he is reading the text, he feels some type of difficulty, and at that time he starts analyzing, he starts doing literary criticism, and doing literary criticism he can really explain the text. So that is the one purpose. Another purpose you can see here, literary criticism helps interpret works to readers who might otherwise fail to understand or appreciate them. So if you can't understand the literary text, if you can't appreciate the literary text, then it is the need of literary criticism, because literary criticism helps you to interpret the text. So here you can see, so without literary criticism, before doing literary criticism, the man or you or the student feel tough, or you or the analyzer or the reader become very sad. But whenever the person or we can understand the literary text, we can analyze the literary text, we can do the literary criticism, then you become happy. So that is another purpose of literary criticism. In the same way, literary criticism helps discover and apply principles that describe good literature. So either the text is good literature or bad literature, that can be understood by doing literary criticism. So these are the purpose of literary criticism. In the same way, what purpose does literary criticism serve? So literary criticism examines, let's see, here again we are talking, whenever we are doing literary criticism, then what we should examine and how we should examine. So we should examine the culture of the text, each and every literary item, each and every story, each and every drama when culture is presented there. Because as we know, we can't survive without culture, or we born with culture, we live with culture, we die with culture. That's why analyzing or doing literary criticism is analyzing or talking about culture. So culture is one of the aspect. In the same way, politics is another aspect. So in each and every, as Aristotle has said, we human beings are political element. So whenever we are analyzing any literary text, we should talk about politics of that literary text. In the same way, gender is another aspect. We should talk about gender. We should talk about popular ideology, because in each and every society, in each and every person, some ideology is there. So using ideology, or what is the popular ideology of that time, you should describe, you should analyze whenever you are doing literary criticism. In the same way, you should talk about history. So history is another factor of doing literary criticism, or whenever talking about what, or whenever doing literary criticism, then you should talk about history, you should talk about psychology, and you should talk about author's life, because the text is the product of author's life. That's why doing literary criticism is talking about author's life. So these are the factors of doing literary criticism, or these factors affect interpretation of the literature. So literary criticism helps establish clear defined standard of evaluation. So by doing literary criticism, you can define, you can find the standard of evaluation, or your evaluation become one of the perfect evaluation whenever you are doing literary criticism. That's why literary criticism is the perfect way of getting solution, perfect way of understanding the text, perfect way of understanding the society, and perfect way of understanding any problem even that are related to our life. So here literary criticism helps to justify imaginative literature in a world that finds its value questionable. So this literary criticism makes you one of the imaginative person, one of the what successful person, and it inspires you to become imaginative. It inspires you to do something. It motivates you to do something. That's why literary criticism is very important, dear friends. So thanks a lot for watching this video. If you like the video, please like it, subscribe it, and share it. Thank you, dear all.